Good evening. You're very welcome to Fate Matters. I'm David Hennessy. I recently had the joy of sitting down to have a conversation with Luis Alvarez, better known as Lucho, who was in Ferns giving a retreat on iconography. Lucho is the definition of polyphacetic, a man of many talents. He was born in Chile, where he graduated in medicine from the University of Santiago. He also received a diploma in theology from the Catholic University of Chile, and further studies of theology in Paris, Lille, Mater Dei Dublin, and a diploma in catechesis from St. Angela College, ascribed to NUI Galway. He likewise obtained a degree in psychology from NUI Galway and studied iconography in Paris, Cyprus, Greece, and Georgia. He lives in the heart of Connemara and is as Irish as a pint of Guinness, while never forgetting his native Chile.
It took very little after that to experience a big conversion, a bit through the nuns,
Yeah.
through prayer, and we started to create a very small group of prayer. Ramon, my sister, and I, every Sunday night we went to Ramon's house to pray from 8 o'clock and sometimes until 11. Until the nuns in the countryside they told us that there is a priest in my own parish. Don't forget, I wasn't practicing, so I didn't know who was in my parish or whatever. But at the same time, in the parish was an Irish priest called Father Edward Barry, who was a volunteer missionary priest from Dublin Diocese in Chile, working in my own parish as a curate. And he started to go to visit these nuns that they were very well known by this gift of prayer. So one day the nun they told us about this priest and they put the priest in contact with us. And from that moment, Eddie Barry, who is in heaven now, I hope, from that moment for many years we did pray together. And later I was living with him for a few years in his own house in another country parish where I was assisting him. He was a parish priest and I was with a title like a curate, lay person, doing all the catechetics work for the parish.
And in this new stage where you were praying, you came back to the sacraments. You became involved in catechesis. You were helping people. You had a lot of experience with these nuns, the nuns who were in the country. You were telling me the other day. Would you tell us about what happened then?
Oh yeah, uh, but you see, at the same time I was a student of medicine at that time. It was convenient for me to live in the same house with Eddie Barry, Father Barry, because it was very close to Santiago, to the place where I was studying. So I didn't need to have
Digs.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we grew up in friendship, like a family, and we grew up in prayer, going to these nuns that they were former Carmelite sisters. They left the monastery and they started in Linares, 300 kilometers to the south of Chile from the capital, Santiago. They started a new community. And that community was living really in a very isolated place in the mountains in front of a group of German people that they came to Chile after the Second War. They
Yeah.
were German
Uh-huh.
and they were Nazi. And the colony was called, or it is, well, it's called at the moment because it's there, Colonia Dignidad. It was founded by one of the biggest Nazis that we know about then, Joseph Mengele,
The butcher,
the 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 the,
the doctor of death,
the angel of death.
the angel of death, Joseph
Yes,
Mengele,
yeah,
the Nazi
yeah.
who
He
escaped. He
he
escaped and he established himself in Chile.
in South America, yes.
And he established this colony of other Nazis went to stay there, and this called it was called
Colonia Dignidad.
Colonia Dignidad. So,
From there, you have 5 colonies in South America: Argentina, Bolivia, Paraguay, Brazil, and Chile.
yeah.
And they were all formed by Mengele, Klaus Barbie, Martin Ralph. No, no, Martin, I can't
Charles
remember.
Barbie, the man who was in Paris, the Nazi who was in
Yeah.
Paris. Well,
And, and Paul Schaeffer was the main chief in command of the colony. Paul Schaeffer was a pastor, a Protestant pastor, who brought a group of children to Chile with the help of the Catholic Church and and the help of, I suppose, the United Nations. So they went as a refugee to Chile to establish a little colony there. But the colony was became later, when from the very beginning they were Nazi in their way of living. It was like a country inside another country.
wow. And so by this time there had been a coup in Chile, and
Yes,
Pinochet had,
1973.
yeah, I remember very well. And there was a coup, and Pinochet
Hmm.
took over, and he backed the Nazis. He supported the Nazis. He was very much in line. Could have been a Nazi himself.
Well, you see, that colony was used as a concentration camp for the prisoner of Pinochet, and many, many Chileans, they disappeared there. They were tortured and they were killed by by the Nazi regime plus the military regime of Pinochet
And
dictatorship.
and you were telling me that they did experiments on people
Oh, yeah.
in that concentration camp.
Well, one of the major problems we don't see or we don't know very well what did really happen, but one of the proof things at the moment was that a lot of the children were taken and being abused, especially by Paul Schaeffer and by the other leaders. Uh, Abuse took place there, violation of the human rights in many, many ways. Um, they were specialized in tortures, so I would say the more sophisticated way of torture were they developed there, and we know that it's quite proved there was a lot of the genetic engineering taking place with cloning, not only animal but as well human beings.
And tell me, Lucho, what was your connection to this place? It would have to do with it was very near the nuns' convent, those nuns you just spoke about a few minutes ago. Would you explain the connection and what happened? What happened between the nuns and this Nazi colony and yourselves?
Well, what happened is that at the noon they are living in front of this colony, the Mother Superior, Paulina Camus, who was the sister, family sister of the bishop in that region, Carlos Camus, who started to denounce all these things. The nuns became the witnesses of the talk with prisoners,
They were
Chilean.
they were witnesses. They were so near. They knew what was
Oh,
going
yeah, of
on.
course, yes. So they started to talk to the bishop. The bishop started to denounce things. He was one of the first bishops to stand up and say to Pinochet, no, you have a dictatorship which is something criminal.
And tell me, what was
And
Pinochet's reaction to the bishop? What did he do?
well, the reaction, we don't know personally what was the reaction of Pinochet, but we know the reaction that the Nazi they took against the bishop. They could not damage the bishop, but they started to persecute the nuns.
Because his sister, the bishop's sister, was the superior of that group of nuns.
One of the reasons. The second reason is that they were witness. So, so the bishop will know by first hand the
Firsthand, everything that was going on in the
exactly,
colony, because
exactly.
they were right physically beside it. They were right near
As
the convent.
as the colony, Dignidad colony became a concentration camp for Chilean prisoners, the convent became a center or refuge for people persecuted in all that area. For example, many girls pregnant, their babies were taken from the colony, they disappeared. Many of the girls went to have their baby in that colony hospital, and they were told that the baby was dead. So babies were disappearing constantly. So the nuns started to denounce all that kind of thing. And the German Nazi, they started to buy the land of all the country people, and they started to grow
To extend,
to extend in their colony until they arrived to the convent that they couldn't move the nuns.
the nuns wouldn't sell.
No. And in that moment, it started a real persecution to the 6 nuns that were living there. Every night they come with big lamps or these electrical
Searchlights.
yes, and they couldn't sleep all night because they illuminated all the place.
Good God.
They put on all night music, German march and music that the nun couldn't sleep. Later, they poisoned all the land around the convent, killing all the animals, the wild animal, rabbits, and all. Later, they cut off all the trees around the convent. And the last thing that they did was to cut off the water, the supply of water to the nuns. So the bishop told them, "You are in danger, you have to leave the place." They prayed and they asked the Lord a sign. In the middle of January, summertime, 32-degree.
It's summertime in January in Chile.
Yes, 32-degree. They are in a hill. Geologically, the hill has not water. Or if the hill has a water, you have to dig very deep.
Of course, yeah.
But anyway, without water, they were thinking we have to go. And one morning, just 1 meter outside the main door, one of the nuns saw that was all wet. And they dig a little, and a well came emerged there, providing water for the nun from January to March, that they were obliged to leave the place. As they were sleeping one night, one nun called them, the rest of the nuns, to come to the chapel and pray.
A nun woke up in the middle of the night and woke up her colleagues and said, "We've got to go to the chapel to pray."
Yes, and they were in the chapel about 40 minutes praying when all the area of the dormitories
yeah.
explodes with a bomb that was
So
like in a sequence.
Then that's a sequence bomb, a bomb that goes off in sequence,
Yes.
a chain bomb, like
a chain bomb that was destroying all the little apartment of the nuns.
So the Nazis put a chain bomb to kill the nuns while they were asleep.
No doubt.
No doubt. Nazis supported by the Pinochet government, no doubt. Tell me, Lucho, this. What was your connection to all this?
Well, my connection was that my faith came back through Mother Paulina and Maria de los Angeles,
who was the superior, and the other,
two of the nuns.
Yeah.
And we were friends since 1974.
So how were you aware of everything that was happening in the convent?
Well, I visited them many times. I stayed with them many times.
You kept over this period you were visiting them.
Of course,
and
yes.
You were a medical student.
Yes, until 1980, that I was qualified doctor, and I continued visiting the nuns there.
As a qualified doctor, you continued visiting them.
So after that, we knew, because the nuns were on the news, on the media.
Yes.
The persecution was very well known in Chile of these innocent women. One of them was shot. And
was shot?
Yes, they were shot, and she was injured in one leg.
Shot by the Nazis. Good God.
So I knew what was happening there very well. I was living in Santiago.
Now, as a doctor, or working in the hospital.
Yes, I was already qualified. I studied here in France for a few years.
So, as when you finished your degree, became a doctor in Chile. You went to France to study.
Yes, and being in France, well, I became very homesick, and I went back to Chile in 1983.
You got ill. You got ill.
No, 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 it was just like a depression,
Homesick.
mommy,
Mamitis.
mamitis.
Yeah, you were
Yes,
homesick for
for mommy. So I
oh,
went
yeah.
back in 1983 thinking it want to be a nice life. I will be uh, established as a doctor and work, and that's it. That was my plan. In 1983, at the end of December, I met a journalist.
You were in the airport, I think, were you?
Yes, I was. I went to say bye bye to a friend of mine from France, French people, at the airport in the middle of December of 1983
In
in
Santiago, in Chile.
Santiago. And in that moment, I saw a young fellow trying to communicate. He was looking for in the tourist office information at the airport where to go and to stay. He was looking for a hostel.
And was he speaking French or he was
He was speaking in broken Spanish
broken
and
Spanish?
English, of course.
And you went to help him.
Yes, and we started to talk, and he ended in my apartment in Santiago, being my guest.
You
And I
invited
was
him to stay
Yeah.
with you.
At
Yeah.
that time, I was living with two elderly sisters.
Uh-huh.
I called them my aunties, and they were religious sisters.
Uh-huh.
We have like a little community going in the apartment. Who it was a big apartment. So this journalist, François Hubert,
Uh,
Belge,
A Belgian.
a Belgian fellow, came, stayed with us, and he told us that he's coming to the country to do um,
A documentary.
a documentary about the situation of Chile. So
He worked with French television.
yes, he
Uh-huh.
was doing a documentary for a program called La Course autour du monde, uh, the racing around the world.
Yes.
Mm? So we told about this interesting life of these nuns, and he said, "Oh, I don't really like to do any religious things or whatever."
He
But
said,
the following morning,
yeah,
on the paper, the nuns were on the paper first page,
yes.
and he was fascinating. And we say, "Well, these are the nuns that we're
They're the nuns
talking."
we were talking about
Yeah,
that you didn't want to have anything to do with. And
exactly.
he was now interested because this was like a political scandal at the time.
Yeah. So anyway, he became interested. We had to ask permission to Bishop Camus to interview the nuns. We went there to interview the nuns
Bishop Camus, who was the brother
of
of
the
Paulina, who was the
Paulina.
superior of the nuns.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we arrived there. Francois made a film. We went to the mountain, and he was capable to have a lot of things coming from the colony. He recorded or he filmed few things like the uniform, people working.
Also, he could
The
film. He had a very good cameras. He
Oh
actually
yeah,
filmed what was going on in the
yeah,
Nazi colony.
yeah. He was filming all the connect electric defense that you are not allowed to go inside.
And the uniforms, did they wear Nazi
Oh yeah, yeah,
uniforms?
yeah. At that time they have short trousers
Yeah,
because the heat of the
yeah.
summer. You see?
But like with the uniform.
Yes,
And he filmed this.
yes. He filmed
And
and
people coming and going, and he was able to film things. Wow.
as he was doing that, he was researching, and we got a lot of information
He interviewed people.
in, from the country,
Yeah.
and he took all that without me myself realizing that I was getting into trouble.
Because you were now his friend.
And I was translating only. I wasn't really
You were his translator.
exactly. So as we came back to the convent after filming through the mountains, we were told that the Nazi, the German, they are going to give us an accident.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Don't forget to tune in to Southeast Radio at the same time next week to hear how Lucho and his companions miraculously escaped certain death and how his life from then on was changed forever. I look forward, God willing, to be with you next week. For now, good night and God bless.